The apartment smelled like dust and boiled rice, the kind of thin, tired smell that clings when cupboards are almost empty. The wall clock ticked too loudly in the afternoons, each second stretching the quiet until it felt physical. I remember standing on a chair to reach it once, just to stop the sound, my palms leaving faint prints on the paint where it had already begun to peel. I was 11 when my mother left for Europe. A whole month. She stood in the doorway with a scarf looped carefully around her neck, perfume sharp and floral, already belonging somewhere else. She pressed a folded bill into my hand, $20, and told me to be good. To be smart. To not make trouble. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. I've always been the responsible one. Even then, it fit me easily like a jacket I'd worn too long to question. The first few days felt like a secret. Cereal for dinner. The TV on late. The thrill of doing things out of order. By the end of the week, the fridge hummed louder than usual, mostly empty except for a jar of mustard and a carton of milk I measured carefully. I learned quickly how far $1 could stretch. Rice. Eggs. The corner store that smelled like old cardboard and oranges. The cashier who didn't ask questions. At night, the building settled into itself. Pipes knocked. A neighbor's radio played softly through the wall. I lay awake listening to my own breathing, counting it the way I counted coins, making sure nothing slipped away unnoticed. Sometimes I pressed my ear to the door, convinced I'd hear my mother's keys. I never did. A memory drifts in when I think about it now. The way sunlight used to land on the kitchen floor in the mornings, catching dust in the air like tiny stars. I'd sit cross-legged, homework spread out, pretending the quiet was chosen. Pretending I liked it. By the second week, the 20 was gone. Not wasted. Used. I didn't cry when I realized it. Crying felt like a luxury. I filled a plastic bottle with water and took it with me everywhere just in case. I learned which days the soup kitchen down the street served lunch and how to walk past it without looking like I needed it too much. I didn't tell anyone. Not the teacher who asked why I was tired. Not the neighbor who knocked once and then stopped. Being the responsible one meant handling things without witnesses. Sometimes late at night I imagine my mother in cafes I'd only seen in movies. Small cups. White tables. Her laugh lighter there, unburdened. I wondered if she missed me. I wondered if she assumed I'd be fine because I always was. When she finally returned, the building smelled different. Fresh paint in the hallway, someone's new cologne drifting in from the stairs. I was sitting at the table sorting pennies into neat stacks when the door opened. Her suitcase wheels scraped against the floor. He called my name, cheerful, tired, already reaching for stories. She stopped when she saw the kitchen. The silence stretched. Her eyes moved slowly, from the bare counter to the empty fridge to me. I watched her face change, color draining, hands tightening around the strap of her bag. She whispered something under her breath, words tumbling over each other, as if saying them louder might make them disappear. No, she said. This can't be happening. I didn't move. I just sat there, hands folded, waiting. Being the responsible one meant staying still when adults needed to understand something they should have known already. My mother stood there longer than I expected, the suitcase still upright by her leg, its handle extended like an accusation. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead, a weak yellow that made everything look smaller, thinner. She set her bag down slowly, as if sudden movement might break something fragile between us. Her perfume mixed with the smell of boiled rice and old tap water, foreign and sharp. She asked where the food was. Not angrily. Confused. As if it had simply wandered off. I told her the truth the same way I told my teachers my homework was done. Calm, rehearsed, efficient. I explained how far $20 went. I explained the rice, the eggs, the days I skipped lunch so I could eat dinner. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't know how. I was 11 and I'd already learned that facts land harder when you don't wrap them in emotion. She sank into the chair across from me, fingers pressed to her mouth. Her nails were still freshly done, pale pink. I noticed that detail and felt something tighten in my chest, something I didn't have a name for yet. The clock kept ticking. I let it. A memory drifted in while she stared at the table. Me at 7 standing on tiptoe at the stove while she talked on the phone, telling me to watch the pot because I was so mature for my age. I'd felt proud then. Trusted. I wondered now how long she'd been trusting me to manage things she didn't want to look at too closely. She asked why I hadn't called her. Her voice wobbled on the last word. I shrugged. International calls were expensive. That was true. But not the whole truth. The rest sat heavy and quiet between us. I didn't want to bother her. I didn't want to be difficult. I was the responsible one. She stood abruptly and opened the fridge, then closed it again. Opened a cabinet. Closed that too. Each small sound echoed. She kept saying my name like she was trying to anchor herself. I watched her move through the space, seeing it for the first time, really seeing it, and wondered how it had been invisible before. She asked if I'd been scared. I thought about the nights when the building groaned and the lights flickered, when I lay awake counting breaths and listening for footsteps that never came. I thought about the soup kitchen and the way I'd memorized its schedule like a secret map. I shook my head. Not scared exactly. Just careful. Careful is what you become when fear doesn't have anywhere to go. She started crying then, quietly, the way adults do when they don't want to be interrupted by their own guilt. She said she thought the neighbor would check in. She said she assumed I'd ask for help if I needed it. Each sentence tried to place the responsibility somewhere just out of reach. I remembered another moment years earlier when I'd fallen off my bike and scraped my knee raw. I'd limped home, blood drying on my skin, and she'd scolded me for not being careful enough. I'd learned then that pain was something you apologized for causing. She reached for my hands. They were cold, but always warm. She kept saying she was sorry over and over, like repetition could build a bridge back to before. I listened. I nodded. That was my job. That night she ordered takeout and watched me eat as if she needed proof that food still worked. The smell of fried oil filled the apartment, heavy and unfamiliar. She hovered, asked if I wanted more, asked if I was okay. I said yes to everything. Being the responsible one meant reassuring the people who were supposed to reassure you. When I went to bed, the apartment felt fuller, louder. Her suitcase sat in the hallway, half unpacked. I lay awake listening to her move around, opening drawers, sighing. For the first time in a month, I wasn't alone. But something had shifted. Even at 11, I understood that apologies don't rewind time. They just mark where something cracked. I stared at the ceiling until sleep finally came, thin and restless, knowing without fully naming it that the month she'd been gone hadn't ended when she walked back through the door. The next morning, my mother woke early. I could hear her moving through the apartment before the sun fully rose. Cups clinking, the faucet running longer than necessary, the soft scrape of a chair being pulled back and pushed in again. The smell of fresh coffee drifted into my room, richer than anything we'd had in weeks. I stayed in bed, staring at the wall, listening. Part of me wanted to stay invisible. Another part wanted proof that she was really there. She packed my lunch for school. A full one. Too full. She stood by the door watching me put it into my bag, her eyes following every movement as if I might vanish if she looked away too long. She hugged me longer than usual, her arms tight, almost desperate. I stood still and waited for it to be over. At school, everything felt louder. Kids complained about cafeteria food. A teacher joked about summer plans. I sat through it all with the strange awareness that something important had happened and no one else knew. I finished my lunch and felt heavy afterward, not just from eating but from being watched again, from the sudden attention that made my skin prickle. When I came home, my mother was on the phone. Her voice was low, urgent. She didn't notice me at first. I set my bag down and listened, not on purpose, just because I was there. She was talking to my aunt. Explaining. Justifying. I heard my name, followed by phrases like I didn't know and she never said anything and she's always been so independent. Each word landed softly but left a mark. A memory drifted in, uninvited. Me at 9, staying home sick, making my own toast because she was running late. Me at 10, walking myself to school in the rain, telling her it was fine. Each moment stacked neatly, proof offered after the fact. She hung up when she saw me. Smiled too quickly. Asked about my day. I answered the way I always did. Fine. Normal words for abnormal things. Over the next few days she tried to fix everything at once. Groceries appeared in excess. Boxes of cereal, fruit going soft before anyone could eat it, food crowding every shelf. She signed me up for activities I hadn't asked for. She checked in constantly, asking where I was, what I needed, how I felt. Her guilt moved through the apartment like a second presence. I watched her closely, the way children do when they sense instability. I noticed how she avoided talking about the trip. How she never explained why she'd thought $20 was enough. How she never asked what it had felt like to be alone at night. One evening I found her sitting at the table, papers spread out in front of her. Bills, statements, itineraries. Her face looked older in the lamplight, shadows settling where certainty used to be. She didn't hear me at first. She whispered to herself, barely audible, repeating the same words she'd said when she walked in the door days earlier. This can't be happening. I realized then that she wasn't freezing because she'd left me without food. She was freezing because the version of herself she believed in had cracked. The good mother. The careful one. The kind who wouldn't do that. And cracks once seen don't disappear. That night I lay in bed listening to the city settle, distant sirens fading, a train horn echoing far away. I felt something unfamiliar but steady take shape inside me. Not anger. Not forgiveness. Awareness. I was still the responsible one. I always would be. But I was beginning to understand the cost of that role, and how quietly it had been assigned. The month had ended. The lesson hadn't. I'm 25 now and I still notice how rooms change when I enter them. How people relax when they realize I'll handle things. How easily responsibility finds its way back into my hands. Some habits don't fade just because time passes. They settle in deeper, become posture. Become instinct. After my mother returned from Europe, life resumed its shape on the surface. Dinners. Routines rebuilt with more groceries and tighter check-ins. She never left me alone like that again. Not physically. But there was a quiet distance that never fully closed. Something unspoken that lived between us, careful not to draw attention to itself. We didn't talk about that month. Not really. It existed like a sealed room in the house. Acknowledged, avoided. When relatives asked how her trip was, she smiled and said it was beautiful. When they asked how I'd been, she squeezed my shoulder a little too hard and said I was so strong. The responsible one. Always had been. Years later, I finally understood what froze her that day in the kitchen. It wasn't just the empty fridge. It was the evidence. Proof that her absence had weight. That her assumptions had consequences. That I had survived something she didn't want to imagine. I didn't grow up resentful. I grew up efficient. Alert. I learned how to read rooms before speaking. How to prepare for hunger before it arrived. How to take care of myself quietly so no one felt accused by my needs. My mother and I are close now in a way that looks good from the outside. We talk weekly. We share recipes. She asks if I'm eating enough. Sometimes she looks at me for a second too long, like she's seeing two versions of me at once. The child she left behind and the adult who learned not to ask. Once not long ago she brought it up. Just briefly. We were washing dishes, the smell of soap sharp and clean, afternoon light slanting across the sink. She said she still thinks about that month. She said she doesn't know how she didn't see it coming. I told her I know. That was all. No anger. No absolution. Just truth placed gently on the counter between us. Being the responsible one taught me many things. How to endure. How to adapt. How to survive quietly. But it also taught me something else much later. That responsibility given too early doesn't disappear. Transforms. It follows you into adulthood unless you decide consciously to loosen its grip. I don't confuse independence with abandonment anymore. I don't confuse silence with strength. And I don't mistake a child's compliance for resilience. If you've ever been the responsible one, the quiet one, the child who figured it out alone, you know how heavy praise can feel when it replaces protection. Some children don't get raised. They get relied on. I still take care of myself. That part never left. But now I do it with intention, not instinct. With choice, not fear. The girl who counted pennies learned how to set boundaries. The 11-year-old who stayed quiet learned how to speak. My mother didn't lose me that month. But she lost the version of me who believed adults always know what they're doing. And I gained something instead. Some lessons begin too early.